Welcome to Just the Facts, episode number, count those digits, 16. Episode number 16. Man, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
16
I'm running out of-
episodes.
Running out of digits.
Running out of digits. And no, you'll just keep going with those until we do 100 when we have our 100th episode. But thanks for tuning in. We are in studio in Henderson, Nevada. So we've taken a little bit of a break.
And do some research.
Do some research so that we can bring that research back to you guys. But now we're back in studio, back traveling again here at Lightspeed VT. We love these guys. If you ever need someone to do a learning management system videos, all kinds of stuff, studio here in Henderson, Nevada, use Lightspeed VT. Good commercial.
Good commercial.
All right. They don't pay us for that, but we get the studio. So that's awesome. It's a good trade off.
That's
right?
worth it. Yeah.
That's good. So we've been talking about inventory for several episodes. Inventory, hard to find, hard to acquire. Where's it at? What do I get? Good quality inventory. We now have dealerships that are actually stocking some accident vehicles for the first time ever that we found out.
Keeping their leases.
Yeah. But what we're going to focus on today is really acquiring inventory from the public or from the consumer that's out there. And some of the pitfalls that we've seen in some of our research that's out there. There's some pitfalls. There's some things that we've seen some broken processes, some things that might just need a little bit of tweaking, but then some overhauls too, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got some good nuggets here, some best practices for you. So Bob, as always, why don't you, I don't even need to introduce yourself at this point, but why don't you kind of enter into this realm of those pitfalls of what you've been seeing in some of the research you've been doing?
Yeah, we talk about it. We did the research because it matters. It's what dealers are facing today. Number one concern to this day is still inventory. And, we talked about this earlier. It's one thing to hear the stories, right? We talk to dealers every day and you hear the stories, but recently we've been traveling and going to those dealers to help them. And when you pull up and they got 5 cars on their lot or 6 cars on their lot, and it's devastating and it's emotionally draining on the staff, right? You walk in and you can hear it, you can feel it. It's a challenge to sell from an empty shelf, right? So dealers have been working on obtaining inventory, and they've been, working on internal processes, whether it be service or lease returns or stepping up on trades, all that. But when it comes to actually buying inventory from the public, here's the challenge. Most dealers are equipped to sell cars, not to buy cars. Dealers had buyers or maybe an appraiser who could put a value on a car or something. But now we're having our sales staff communicate with sellers of cars in an attempt to buy cars from people. And we're not so good at that, right? We're not so good at that.
I was flat out say no.
Yeah.
It's not good at all.
Yeah. So we wanted to share with our audience today some of the pitfalls that we've seen live, right? We want to make sure what we're hearing and seeing and feeling. And it's one thing to talk to dealers. It's another thing to actually be there and work side by side with them and see it in action. And that's what we want to share with them today. Just trying to help. Like most things, you can throw rocks at everybody, right? Everybody's got the same general stuff going on. So we're not picking on anybody, but we are trying to alleviate some of the speed bumps, if you will, right? Speed bumps. Let's call them that.
So outside of pitfalls, we're going to now call them speed bumps.
Sure, why not?
Yeah. So what are some of them? I mean, well, let's tackle one first.
Well, number one, and we talked about this actually in one of our episodes of Just the Facts, and that is being able to identify, first of all, what kind of communication is it? Is it a customer who's calling us to sell us their car? Or is a customer reaching out to us to trade in their car and buy another car?
And that was a good episode. That was with David Kane, right?
Yeah, David.
Yeah, so if you haven't watched that, go back and look at that episode. I don't know what number it was, but that was a great one. So going back to what you're saying there, like finding the right person, like who's handling that.
Yeah. And it does matter, right? It does matter because salesmen are oriented to sell cars. They're wired at this point. It's what they do is convert traffic into sales. Well, the challenge is when we get a customer comfortable enough to reach out to a dealer to sell the dealer their car, and the first moments sounds and feels like a traditional sales pitch, they're out of here, right? They didn't want to be sold a car, which is why they weren't touching the dealer in the first place. And that's the number one pitfall, right? The number one pitfall is miscommunicating with the consumer and putting a dealership's agenda in front of the consumers.
And that by no means is like saying that that salesperson is bad at what they do.
No,
Like, it's just not in their wheelhouse.
it's not what they
It's
do.
just not something that they do. Like, make sure that you use the talents and
We're not,
abilities that they have and what they do best, and that would be selling cars. And this wouldn't be one of those.
and we're not even saying they can't, but you have to educate them, just like you educated them how to sell cars. Now you have to educate them on how to buy cars. Just don't hand your salespeople a contact and say, call this person about buying their car. That doesn't work.
Or find someone that it's their strength.
Yeah. But most stores, again, may not have them currently. You have to create them, right?
Sure,
Just like
sure.
you had to create a sales staff. The second part of that equation, though, is how the dealers are funneling the traffic. Because traditional methods said, whether it was phone, email, tag, whatever, it came into the DMS, right? It came into the management system and then got funneled to either a sales desk or a BDC or whatever that might be. And the challenge is when you funnel everything the same, you treat everything the same, and everyone reacts the same, not so good.
Mm-hmm.
Not so good, right? That leads to the challenge of not being able to identify sales versus acquisition, because how you handle that matters. So not only is it who handles it, but it's how's it being handled, right? It's the process in place.
No, that makes total sense. And so I like where you're going with that, with changing it's just a little tweak, right? Of who
Nothing
handles it,
major.
who takes in that lead. Now, how about at the dealership itself?
Yeah.
So if we're talking about the consumer, you've now said, hey, we'll buy your car. I see these all over the place.
Yeah,
right?
everywhere,
So I'll
yeah.
be driving down the freeway and I'll see a big banner that says, we'll buy your car.
Yeah.
And so we talked about that on previous episodes. But on this one, when we're talking about that customer that finally comes in, maybe they just came in off the street, maybe they called first, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But when they're there at the dealership, they say, hey, I want to sell my car. How are they treated? You've seen some of this firsthand. And then what's the best practice there when they're finally there at the dealership and said, they have no intention of buying a car.
Yeah.
They need to get out from under their car for whatever reason, but they saw the ad, they saw the billboard, they saw the banner on the dealership wall.
Yeah.
What do you do with that customer?
Well, here's the thing, and I hate talking stats. I'm the furthest removed from a stat person.
That is true.
I will tell you this though: stats are telling us now that we have enough of this to measure that when a customer sells you their car, it always seems to be 7 out of 10, but 7 out of 10 is the number. Actually, buy another car, right? So once they dispose of their car, they need transportation. Now that's not 100%. And you don't go for the sale first. You go for the acquisition first. Just know that done well and done correctly, around 7 out of 10, let's say, are going to go ahead and get another car from you. So you end up with the sale in most cases, just not all of them, because some people are planning on selling it. Some people are giving it to their kids, getting it inspected, whatever. But just know ultimately you'll end up selling cars, right? But priority number one that we're talking about was an inventory shortage. So priority one is inventory acquisition, right? Inventory acquisition. So here's the thing. It's not only identifying the leads, which we touched on a little bit, and making sure you have the right people handling them, which we touched on a little bit, but it goes deeper than that, because you don't want an inventory acquisition to feel like a negotiation process. You don't want it to feel like a negotiation opportunity, right? And the way you do that is by maybe changing the way you appraise cars, right? We've talked about active trade appraisals in the past. I'm going to touch on that right now real quick. Keep the customer involved in the appraisal process. Don't bring a salesperson with you. Use the customer's knowledge of the vehicle. Let the customer actually sell you their vehicle. Because when you do that, you do a number of things. First thing you do is keep the customer occupied so they're not sitting there building up anticipation, right? But number two, when they help appraise the vehicle, they take part ownership of that number. They were part of the process. They own part of that number. But then the next step is probably, I don't know if it's more important, but it's certainly equal. And that is to use a third party to create the value. Now we work for Carfax. We're going to tell you about our Carfax products. There's other products out there. The bottom line is to use a third party to use the number so that when you're working with the consumer and they help do the appraisal, now you use a third party number so that it doesn't feel like your dealership is trying to negotiate a deal with the customer. You're just simply looking at the evaluation and offering the customer a fair evaluation to acquire their car.
Makes complete sense. I think where people need to kind of see it.
Yeah, yeah. And here's the thing, when you do it that way, okay, let's say you don't sell a car, you just buy the car from that customer. What you're doing is showing them how your dealer does
There you go.
business. You
Yeah,
know,
that's important.
you are earning a customer, right? Inventory is one thing. Customers are more expensive, right?
Mhm.
Customers are far more expensive than inventory. So being able to put your business in front of another consumer is ultimately how you stay in business. It's how you grow your business. So even though you may not immediately be selling the car, you are taking in an inventory. Now that's leading to my next point.
Is this a pitfall?
No,
Just a point.
point,
Point.
efficiency point. And it could be a pitfall, I guess, but you have to make a decision as a dealer. Are we only going to acquire cars that we know we're going to retail? Or do we just acquire them all and have the consumer information and the consumer interaction? Because here's the point, wholesale's profitable right now, right? Wholesale's up 35%. So even though you may not intend on retailing that car, it still is a profit center. But more importantly, it puts your name and experience in front of more consumers than ever before. But you have to make that decision upfront because you don't want someone spending their time, efforts, and resources to acquire inventory, and then you don't want it, right? You don't want to do that to your people. So make that decision and make sure they're perfectly clear. Now, every dealer is a little different. There's no blanket answers. The majority of the dealers are deciding if it's a contact, it's a contact. Let's do interaction with the consumer. Again, even if it's a wholesale piece, will be profitable. Let's just go for it.
Gotcha. I think there's another pitfall out there, and that would be the price of the acquisition, and that would be how much a dealer is willing to give the customer for their car. Now, I think part of what's happening out there, and I'm not going to say it's anyone's fault, but I hear ads on the radio. Yes, I still listen to the radio. So Sirius XM.
You look like a
So
DJ right now. Oh, you are a DJ.
I'm DJ. Yeah.
How about that?
So I hear stuff, I see stuff that says not just we'll buy your car, but we'll pay top dollar for your car.
Yeah, and
So
thousands over this and thousands.
don't know where consumers are going. Maybe they're using, whatever pricing tool that's out there. But it doesn't seem to be matching up. And so what are some of the best practices to that pitfall? Because we've realized that this is one of those pitfalls in the process where, the customer comes in, maybe it's handled the right way, but all of a sudden the number is way off from what the customer expected or anticipated. So maybe walk through some best practices and what we're starting to talk to dealers about.
Yeah, the best practice is to not do that. Right. So when you reach out to the public and you are asking the public to do business with you in a manner upon which they're not used to it, you got to be real careful what you promise, right? The cleaner, the simpler, the more logical, the better. Just stick to how you will do the process, not how you will evaluate the car. They don't care how you evaluated it. They just want to be a fair offering. So using taglines like thousands over this and thousands under that and all, top dollar and that sounds like a sales pitch. And
It does.
we're not selling right. We're acquiring inventory. So keep it clean, simple, and logical, right? Now, bear in mind, some dealers are using taglines like a safe process, right? Because of the whole COVID angle of it, a contactless process. Those kinds of things speak to the current environment.
Sure.
It doesn't speak to how we're selling something. So that I understand. Okay. But to tell someone you'll give them thousands of this or under that, or we'll beat any competitor, that all of a sudden that sounds like a traditional sales, and you are going to scare more people by the way you're presenting yourself than you will win people over because you think you have a slick tagline. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And so you hear about it,
Yeah.
And, I understand it. And you do want to give the most for that vehicle and and communicate that to the customer. But there's some other ways to do that. And I think really when we're talking to customers, because we do as well in our research, is they just want a fair deal. They want someone to really see their vehicle the way they see it, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Which
it
is
might
why
be
you
their
keep,
baby.
that's why you keep them involved.
It might be their baby, right?
It
It's
is their
that
baby.
car is important to them. They remember the first scratch, the first ding, the
Yeah.
first thing. They feed it butterscotch pudding at night. I was going to use that. I had to use that at some point, because they park in their living room. But it is important to them, right? That car is so important to them. But acknowledge that, right?
Yeah.
Give
100%.
them merit for the work they've done on the car, the way they've kept the car up, what may show up on a vehicle history report, whatever it is. Give them some merit to taking care of that car because it is their baby. And when you do that, I think it goes a long way to the customer that is going to sell it because they are scared in a way.
Well,
There is a fear
there's a
factor there,
nervous
not just
tension
of
for
buying
sure.
a car,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think we forget when the customer is giving their car away, they've got emotions involved. And you guys know this. This is not something that's new,
Yeah.
but there's an emotional attachment that's breaking and they go through a mourning process in a way.
That's not new, but the interaction doing this is new.
Yes.
And we're in the dealer's world, right? Like dealing with cars doesn't scare us. Remember the public. It's very hard to do. It's the number one pitfall of all car business is to remember what it feels like to be a consumer. So try and have empathy for them. Try and keep things as calm, cool, and collected as possible. And keep everything in a logical progression, right? To leave a customer sitting by themselves for 30 minutes and that ain't gonna work. It just ain't gonna work. If you're gonna do this, do it right. Don't just toe dip. Have a dedicated team, have a dedicated process, put a real effort forth, and customers can tell. I'll be honest with you. We have dealers that are trying this. Some are taking in 5 cars, some are taking in 40. The difference is how they're doing it, right? The difference is how you're doing it. Putting a little time, effort, and putting a team together and having everyone in sync and having the communication with the consumer be in sync and having the efforts all being the same internally, all that stuff matters. But getting back to the pitfalls, make sure you can identify the 2 different types of leads coming in your store today. Be able to identify whether it's a sales lead or it's an inventory acquisitions lead. Pitfall number 2, make sure you have the right people handling the traffic, right? Remember, your best salesman is not necessarily your best person to have in working with inventory acquisition, right? Number 3, make sure your appraisal process is designed a little different to keep the customer involved and use third-party numbers to keep away from the negotiation phase. You don't want this to be a typical negotiation. You want this to be a partnership with the consumer, taking an honest appraisal, putting a real number on a car, and moving forward.
Great stuff. That's good. I have one more for you. I'd like that recap, but I do have one more for you because in some of our research that we've done, we've seen a best practice, and that would be some salespeople calling on their customers, their previous customers.
Yeah.
And because they have those in their database, their DMS, right?
Yeah.
And on the anniversary calls, which I think is a great idea. But I think it goes back to the point of the sales process again, that it seems kind of salesy because I get those phone calls, I get those mailers. We're looking for your vehicle, but I think there's a good way to do it. And so, as we've done our research, what's a good way to handle those anniversary calls? Should that be someone else? Because now you're being a little bit more proactive
Yeah.
than reactive and waiting for the customer to call in. Now you're actually reaching out to them. Not everybody answers their phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what are some ways if you do leave a message or you do send a mailer, or you do send a birthday card out or whatever your process is there? What are some good ways in which that help in that?
Well, I want to touch on 2 things that you just brought to my friend of mine. One of the things we found is that with inventory acquisition leads, if you'll call them that, call them. The old method of if they text, we text, if they call, we call, if they email, we may, the traditional business, that's not the case. They want to be contacted by a person. They want to talk to a person. So these are all call. You call these customers for your point of
Interesting.
contact.
Mhm.
Okay. It's not the traditional sales where, the old method was if they emailed, we do
Sure.
it because that's their preferred, right? They want to be contacted. They want to be called. They want to talk to someone. So that's the first thing. Second thing is I remember that with David Kane. David Kane said that the dealers that have been progressive for a while were in better situations now because when they sell the car new, remember, they said that we will contact you. You are our customer. We are your best value proposition because we know the car better than anyone else. And we are setting up in advance, to your point, the contact points. We will call you. We will keep you informed what your car is worth. When you come in for service, we're going to let you know up front additional where your car sits value wise. And remember?
Yes, I do.
And that was David.
Very well.
And David runs the 20 group meetings, and that was all stuff that came to David through those 20 group meetings, and those are excellent ideas. So again, it should be an offensive play, not a defensive play, right? So those anniversary calls, to what you're asking, same with if you are trying to identify whether it is a acquisition lead or a sales lead, and you can't tell by the way it came in, it should be the first thing you ask, right? Because remember, this is a positive, not a negative like tradition. So if I'm talking to you and I call you and I say, "Hey DJ, I saw you asked us to reach out for you. I just wanted to ask you up front so we can do this the right way. Are you just strictly wanting to sell us your car, or were you also interested in the car? What would you like to talk about, DJ?" And you just bring that up front, right? And you set the rest of the tone up front, not aggressively, not over the top, but just like I just did. "Hey DJ, I'm reaching back out to you. Just quick question for you because I couldn't really tell. Were you just strictly wanting to sell us your car, or were you also interested in looking at another car?"
I want to sell it.
Yeah, and boom, that's how we go. So it's not as complicated as it sounds. You have to get there though. You don't want to go too far into the communication without knowing up front and how to handle it the right way.
Yep. And you don't want to alienate that customer too, because that might be one of your best customers
Absolutely
that you
not.
have
Yeah, absolutely.
that are coming into your service drive, and you want to keep that customer.
Yep. So let's go to your anniversary question. When you call a customer back on an anniversary call, it should be a generalization. There should be nothing specific about that call in the beginning, right? It's just a general, "Hey DJ, I didn't mean to bother you. Been 12 months since you bought the car from me. I promised to reach out. That's what I'm doing. So how's everything going?" And you just let the customer talk next and go where the customer takes you. "Oh, I'm glad you called because I'm thinking about selling my car." Or, "Well, I appreciate the call, but I don't really have time today." Well, that's a different conversation, right? So when you call, you start out with general conversation. "Hey DJ, just calling, following up with you. I promised you I would. So that's what I'm doing now," and take it from there. But you shouldn't have a set agenda. There should not be a set agenda on that call.
And you're not calling them to sell the car.
No, you're
either,
not. You're not doing anything. You don't have a set agenda. You're just doing a contact because that's what you told them you would do. So therefore, you have the ability to do it, but you need to let them take the conversation somewhere and follow their lead.
I think that's a great idea to start that at the beginning.
Yep.
Let them know, set their expectations.
100%.
They'll know why you're calling, and they may answer the phone or email or text, whichever way.
And reach out to David Kane. He's got great ideas.
He's got really, really good ideas. That's David, Kain. There's another commercial.
Kane Automotive.
KaneAutomotive.com. That's it for our time today. Good episode.
It was a good episode.
Great episode. We know we've been sticking on inventory. Why? It's the number one concern
Still is.
you guys say you're dealing with, and that's still inventory. And so we're going to stay on it and help you out as best we can and do the research necessary to give you a few nuggets that we hope you could use to help improve your process. Thanks again for tuning in to Just the Facts.
Take care, everybody.